Beloved, let's talk about the women we often don't see clearly, the wives of narcissists. From the outside, their lives may seem perfect, polished, composed, enviable. But behind the scenes, there's another story, a story of quiet endurance, invisible battles, and resilience so fierce it takes your breath away. These women carry a heavy burden to cover the cracks in the relationship, to ensure the world sees only the glitter while they live with the grit. They are masters of masking the pain, expertly navigating the social script of everything's fine, even when their hearts are breaking. There is a unique kind of loneliness that comes from being loved in all the wrong ways. Imagine being the one everyone envies, the one whose partner showers them with grand gestures, compliments, and public affection. To the outside world, you are the epitome of a perfect relationship, the kind of story people dream of. Yet, behind the closed doors of your home, where the cameras don't reach and the applause fades, you are left in a vacuum of emotional neglect. This is the paradox faced by the wives of narcissists, a dissonance that fractures their sense of self and leaves them isolated in ways few can comprehend. Publicly, these women are cherished. They are often spoken of in glowing terms by their partners, praised for their beauty, their intelligence, their unwavering support. The narcissist thrives on the admiration these proclamations elicit from others, creating an illusion of a loving, harmonious relationship. But these grand displays aren't for the wife's benefit. They are for the audience, a carefully curated performance that serves to boost the narcissist's image. And so, while the world sees her as adored, she begins to feel like an accessory, a prop in someone else's story. In private, the dynamics shift. The same partner who is so attentive and affectionate in public now becomes cold, critical, or indifferent. Conversations revolve around their needs, their achievements, their grievances. When the wife seeks connection, she is met with dismissal or manipulation. Over time, she learns that her emotions are inconvenient, her needs unwelcome. It's a devastating contrast to be elevated in public, yet diminished in private. To feel seen by the world, but invisible to the one person who should know her best. This duality creates a profound sense of isolation. The world assumes she is living a fairy tale, and she feels pressure to maintain that narrative. Admitting the truth would mean shattering the illusion and exposing the cracks in the facade. Worse, it might invite judgment or disbelief. After all, how could someone so adored possibly feel unloved? This isolation is compounded by the fact that the narcissist often frames themselves as the victim in private disputes, leaving the wife doubting her own perspective and questioning her worth. And yet, this loneliness doesn't come from a lack of strength or love on her part. It comes from the deep yearning for authentic connection, a connection that a narcissistic partner is incapable of offering. She doesn't want the world's admiration. She wants her partner's presence. She doesn't need grand gestures. She craves simple, genuine moments of understanding. But in a relationship where appearances matter more than reality, those moments are rare, if they come at all. Your universe holds the answer to the question. To break free from this paradox, the wife must embark on a journey of self-reclamation. She must recognize that her worth is not tied to the role she plays in her partner's story. She is not an accessory. She is a person with her own needs, dreams, and emotions. The process of rediscovering her identity, her voice, and her power is not easy. It requires immense courage to step out of the spotlight and into her own light. But in doing so, she will find something far more fulfilling than public admiration. She will find the kind of love and connection that starts from within. This paradox of being beloved yet isolated is a painful one, but it is not a life sentence. With awareness, support, and self-compassion, these women can break free from the cycle of neglect. and rediscover the beauty of a life lived authentically. And in that journey, they will find not only healing, but the kind of strength that transforms loneliness into liberation. Behind every carefully curated smile and every reassuring nod, there is a story of a woman who has learned the exhausting art of masking her pain. To the outside world, she is the picture of grace and strength, a partner who seems to have it all together. But beneath that polished exterior lies a complex web of emotional labor, one that demands constant vigilance and relentless effort. This is the burden of presenting a facade of perfection, a survival strategy for navigating a relationship with a narcissist. For these women, the mask serves as both armor and camouflage. It protects them from the probing eyes of a world that often equates vulnerability with weakness. It also shields their narcissistic partner, ensuring that the cracks in the relationship remain hidden from view. Every word, every gesture, every interaction is carefully measured to maintain the illusion of a harmonious partnership. They have mastered the art of deflecting questions, redirecting conversations, and laughing off concerns, all to preserve the image of a perfect life. But the cost of this facade is staggering. Emotional labor is invisible, yet it drains energy as surely as physical exertion. These women are constantly on edge, anticipating potential triggers and preempting conflict before it arises. They edit themselves in real time, suppressing their feelings and silencing their needs to avoid upsetting the delicate balance. The mental toll of this constant vigilance is profound, leading to anxiety, exhaustion, and a creeping sense of disconnection from their authentic selves. The facade also isolates them. When you are always pretending that everything is fine, it becomes nearly impossible to reach out for help. Friends and family may see the perfect couple and assume there is no need for concern. And even if they suspect something is amiss, the woman's mask of composure makes it difficult for others to truly understand the depth of her struggle. Over time, she becomes trapped in her own performance, unable to step out of character for fear of judgment or disbelief. What makes this emotional labor so insidious is that it often goes unacknowledged, even by the woman herself. She may tell herself that keeping up appearances is necessary, that it's her role to maintain peace and protect the relationship. But in doing so, she places her partner's image and comfort above her own well-being. The mask may feel like a tool for survival, but it is also a barrier that prevents her from addressing the underlying issues and seeking the support she needs. Breaking free from this cycle of masking the pain requires immense courage. It means acknowledging the harm caused by the facade and recognizing that vulnerability is not a weakness but a source of strength. It means allowing herself to be seen, not as perfect, but as human. This process is not easy, and it often comes with resistance from those who benefit from the illusion of perfection. But by shedding the mask, these women open the door to authenticity, connection, and healing. In the end, the emotional labor of masking the pain is not sustainable. No one can carry the weight of perfection forever. By daring to let the mask slip, these women can begin to reclaim their power, their identity, and their truth. And in doing so, they will find a deeper, more meaningful strength, one that doesn't come from presenting a perfect image, but from embracing their imperfect humanity. Imagine living in a space where every word you say, every action you take, and even the way you breathe feels like it could detonate an invisible minefield. For many women in relationships with narcissists, this is their daily reality, a life spent walking on eggshells, where constant vigilance becomes a survival strategy. This state of hyper-awareness isn't just exhausting, it's a slow erosion of the soul, leaving them questioning their worth, their choices, and their very existence. Walking on eggshells starts as a coping mechanism, a way to keep the peace in an environment where conflict is as unpredictable as it is inevitable. Narcissists often thrive on control and emotional dominance, and any perceived slight or misstep can trigger their wrath. These women learn to anticipate moods, analyze tones, and second guess their every decision in an attempt to avoid triggering an argument or being subjected to passive aggressive punishment. It's not just about avoiding a fight, it's about surviving in a space where emotional safety is constantly at risk. This hypervigilance comes with profound psychological consequences. Over time, the wife begins to lose her ability to trust her instincts. She becomes so focused on meeting the narcissist's needs and avoiding their triggers that her own needs fade into the background. The constant self-editing and self-monitoring create a sense of disconnection from her authentic self. Who is she, if not the one who constantly adjusts to keep the peace? This disorientation is compounded by the narcissist's gaslighting, which further undermines her sense of reality and self-worth. The external impact of walking on eggshells is just as damaging. Relationships with friends and family often suffer, as the woman becomes consumed by the demands of managing her partner's emotions. She may decline invitations, withdraw from social interactions, or avoid discussing her struggles out of fear that the narcissist will retaliate. Her world shrinks, becoming defined by the boundaries her partner sets, leaving her isolated and without a support system. The eggshells don't just line her home, they extend into every corner of her life. Perhaps the most insidious aspect of this constant vigilance is how it normalizes dysfunction. When you live in a state of perpetual tension, it can start to feel like the default. The woman may rationalize the behavior, telling herself that it's not so bad, that all relationships have their challenges, or that she just needs to try harder. But deep down, she knows the truth. This is not what love is supposed to feel like. Love should not require walking on eggshells. It should be a space of safety, trust, and mutual respect. The path to breaking free from this cycle begins with awareness and self-compassion. Recognizing the toll of constant vigilance is the first step in reclaiming a sense of agency and worth. It means understanding that the responsibility for conflict lies not with her, but with her partner's unwillingness to engage in healthy communication. Reaching out for support, whether from trusted friends, family, or a therapist, can provide the validation and strength needed to step off the eggshells and onto solid ground. Walking on eggshells is not sustainable, nor is it a reflection of the woman's strength or resilience. It's a symptom of a toxic dynamic that prioritizes control over connection. By choosing to stop navigating the minefield, she begins the journey toward freedom, authenticity, and the kind of love that doesn't demand constant vigilance, but instead offers unconditional acceptance. In this brave act of stepping away, she reclaims not just her peace, but her life. There's a subtle, insidious force that erodes the foundation of one's reality over time: gaslighting. For many women in relationships with narcissists, this psychological manipulation is not just a momentary tactic. It is a continuous, relentless reprogramming of their perception of truth. It begins with small shifts, gentle suggestions that things are not as they seem, but over time, it leads to a deep fracture in their sense of self. Gaslighting creates a world where doubt replaces confidence, where confusion masks clarity, and where their own inner compass becomes unrecognizable. At first, the gaslighting is often subtle. A narcissistic partner might casually dismiss her feelings, telling her that she's overreacting or being too sensitive. They may twist her words or manipulate her memory of past events, claiming things never happened the way she remembers them. At first, these moments may seem trivial, a harmless miscommunication, but when repeated over time, they slowly chip away at her ability to trust herself. The constant invalidation of her emotions and experiences leaves her questioning her own perception of reality. As the gaslighting deepens, the confusion becomes overwhelming. The woman starts second-guessing herself, unable to distinguish between what is real and what is being distorted. What once felt like a gut instinct now feels like a foreign language. Her emotions, once a reliable compass guiding her through life, become suspect. She begins to feel as if she's lost her ability to think clearly or make decisions. Yet when she turns to her partner for reassurance, they present themselves as the only one who truly understands. This dynamic reinforces her dependency on the narcissist's perspective, leaving her isolated from her own inner wisdom. The emotional toll of gaslighting is profound, creating a cyclical pattern of self-doubt and self-blame. The woman might find herself apologizing for things she didn't do, or compromising her values to keep the peace. She begins to feel as if she is the problem, the one who is too emotional, too irrational, too flawed to be understood. With every round of gaslighting, the narcissist tightens their grip on her sense of self-worth, convincing her that she is the source of every issue, that her needs and desires are unimportant, and that she is incapable of knowing what's best for her. What makes this experience so painful is that it creates a rift between her and the very essence of who she is. As her confidence erodes, she feels disconnected from her truth. Her intuition, once sharp and clear, becomes muffled, like a distant whisper that she can't quite hear. In this state of confusion, it becomes difficult to make even the smallest decisions without feeling paralyzed by uncertainty. The narcissist, who thrives on this confusion, presents themselves as a source of clarity and wisdom, further entrenching the belief that her instincts are unreliable. Breaking free from the grasp of gaslighting requires a journey of rediscovery, a process of reconnecting with the inner voice that has been silenced for so long. It starts with acknowledging the truth that has been buried beneath layers of manipulation. Her feelings are valid, her experiences are real, and she deserves to be seen and heard. Rebuilding trust in her own instincts takes time, but it is possible. Therapy, self-reflection, and support from trusted individuals can provide the space needed to recalibrate her internal compass. As she reclaims her sense of self, she begins to distinguish the truth from the distortion and moves toward a life where self-doubt no longer reigns supreme. Gaslighting is a powerful tool of control, but it is not invincible. The more the woman reconnects with her authentic self, the more she unravels the grip of manipulation. No longer will she be forced to navigate life through the distorted lens of someone else's version of reality. Instead, she will learn to trust the wisdom that resides within her, a wisdom that is capable of guiding her through even the most challenging situations. In the end, the road to reclaiming one's inner compass is not just about healing the wounds of gaslighting. It is about rediscovering the strength and power that was always hers, waiting to be remembered. There is a type of loneliness that cannot be seen on the surface, a quiet, unspoken isolation that sits in the deepest corners of the heart. This is the loneliness that arises not from physical absence, but from emotional abandonment. For many women in relationships with narcissists, the silence is deafening. They are surrounded by people, perhaps even by their partner. Yet there is an overwhelming sense that no one truly sees them. This is the silent loneliness that grows in the shadows, unnoticed by the world, but excruciatingly real for the woman who bears it. The emotional abandonment that fosters this loneliness is particularly insidious because it often masquerades as love. A narcissistic partner may shower their spouse with grand gestures, praises, and affection when it serves their own needs. But when the spotlight fades, so too does their attention and emotional presence. The woman is left to navigate the complexities of the relationship on her own, constantly trying to meet the emotional needs of someone who is incapable or unwilling to reciprocate. This lack of emotional connection creates a void that no amount of attention or validation from others can fill. Over time, this abandonment becomes internalized. The woman begins to question her worth, wondering if she is not enough to deserve love, attention, or care. She might feel like a ghost in her own life, physically present but emotionally invisible. The narcissist, focused on their own needs and desires, seldom offers the emotional support that would validate her experience. The loneliness she feels is not only the absence of affection, it is the absence of being truly seen. To be in a relationship where you are emotionally unseen is to exist in a state of perpetual longing, longing for connection, for recognition, for validation. The toll of this silent loneliness can manifest in many ways, particularly in a woman's sense of self-worth. The more emotionally abandoned she feels, the more she begins to withdraw from herself. She stops reaching out, stops seeking connection, stops believing that others could offer the depth of support she needs. She may suppress her emotions, telling herself that it's not worth burdening others. Or she might try to convince herself that things are not as bad as they seem. But this ongoing emotional neglect, compounded by her own feelings of inadequacy, gradually erodes her spirit, leaving her feeling small, isolated, and adrift. It is not just the loneliness that takes its toll. It is the constant disconnection from her own needs and desires. A woman who is emotionally abandoned is often forced to give more than she receives. In her attempt to maintain some semblance of balance, she sacrifices her emotional health, suppressing her own needs to avoid conflict or further neglect. She may even begin to believe that she is unworthy of love and affection, internalizing the message that her emotional well-being is secondary to the narcissist's needs. This self-neglect, though gradual, creates a deep emotional scar that can take years to heal. Yet healing from silent loneliness is not an impossible task. The first step is acknowledging the pain, giving a voice to the deep sorrow that has long been silenced. By recognizing the emotional abandonment for what it is, the woman can begin the process of reclaiming her own worth. Seeking therapy, opening up to trusted friends or family, and finding ways to reconnect with herself through creative expression, spiritual practices, or self-care can help mend the rift left by years of emotional neglect. In doing so, she begins to build a new foundation for her life, one that is no longer defined by the absence of love, but by the presence of self-compassion and resilience. Silent loneliness is a quiet killer of the spirit, but it does not have to be a permanent state. By embracing her worth and learning to nurture her emotional needs, the woman can break free from the cycle of abandonment. She can rediscover the power of vulnerability, the strength that comes from asking for help, and the beauty of authentic connection. No longer will she be a ghost in her own life. She will reclaim her voice, her presence, and ultimately her freedom. In that reclamation, the loneliness dissipates, and she is left with the powerful knowledge that she is whole, worthy, and deserving of the love she has always needed. There is a quiet, often unseen strength that resides in those who endure the deepest of emotional trials. It is not a strength that shouts for attention or demands recognition. Rather, it is a resilience that grows in the shadows, in the spaces where pain is hidden from the world, and the weight of survival becomes an internal battle. For women trapped in relationships with narcissists, this resilience is born not from triumph, but from the sheer act of enduring, of waking up each day despite the emotional devastation and choosing to keep going. It is the strength to remain steady in the face of constant turbulence, even when every part of them wants to crumble. Resilience in the shadows often begins with the simple act of surviving. When everything around you feels unstable, when the person you love and trust most is the one who causes you harm, survival becomes the first priority. These women develop a kind of emotional fortitude that allows them to push through the pain, the manipulation, the gaslighting, and the isolation. It's not because they don't feel the weight of their circumstances, but because they have learned to withstand the pressures that come with living in the shadows of narcissistic abuse. Every day feels like a quiet battle, but they continue to fight. Not for recognition, but for the hope of something better. But resilience is not just about surviving, it's about rebuilding. After years of emotional neglect, manipulation, and psychological harm, these women must rebuild not only their sense of self, but their entire world. It is no small feat to reclaim the parts of oneself that have been lost or damaged in such an environment. Each day spent in the shadow of a narcissistic partner is a day spent doubting one's worth, questioning one's perceptions, and sacrificing one's dreams. To rebuild after that kind of devastation takes an immense amount of courage. It is like planting seeds in the dark, knowing that the light may not come right away, but hoping that growth is still possible. The rebuilding process is often slow and painstaking. The woman must unlearn the behaviors that were once necessary for survival, walking on eggshells, masking her pain, and suppressing her needs. She must learn to trust herself again, to acknowledge that her feelings and desires are valid and that she deserves the love and respect she has been denied. This requires a kind of inner resilience that goes beyond the physical. It is a mental, emotional, and spiritual strength that refuses to give up on the possibility of healing. She learns to give herself the compassion that was once withheld and to recognize that her worth is not determined by the narcissist's inability to love her. Oh, yet, even as the process of rebuilding unfolds, the woman may encounter moments of doubt. There are setbacks. Times when the shadows of the past loom large, threatening to pull her back into old patterns. These moments can feel overwhelming, as if the weight of everything she has endured might crush her spirit once again. But with each small victory, with each moment of clarity, she strengthens her resolve. Resilience is not the absence of struggle. It is the ability to rise again, even when it feels impossible. And with every setback she overcomes, she becomes more whole, more authentic, and more connected to her own truth. The strength it takes to endure and rebuild is not a linear journey. There will be days when the shadows feel suffocating and the progress made seems fragile. But with each step taken toward healing, the woman discovers a deeper well of resilience within herself. Resilience that is not born from perfection, but from persistence, from the quiet courage to keep moving forward, even in the darkest of times. It is this resilience that will guide her out of the shadows and into a life that is finally hers to live. In the end, resilience in the shadows is not just about surviving abuse. It is about rediscovering the power within to reclaim one's life. It is about honoring the journey, understanding that the strength forged in the darkness will bring light to a future that is rich with possibility. The woman who once endured in silence will rise as one who has not only survived, but rebuilt herself into someone unbreakable, someone who knows her worth and stands firm in it. She will no longer be defined by the shadows of her past, but by the brilliant strength that helped her emerge from them. So, there comes a point in every woman's journey when the weight of emotional confinement becomes too much to bear. For women caught in narcissistic relationships, this moment of realization is both painful and empowering. It is the moment when they recognize that they have spent far too long living in someone else's shadow, defined by their partner's needs and expectations, rather than by their own truth. Breaking free is not simply a decision. It is an act of profound courage. It requires looking deep into the mirror of one's soul and finding the strength to declare, I am worthy of something more. It is about choosing to honor oneself, even when the world, and often the narcissistic partner, seems to tell her otherwise. The courage to break free is rooted in the painful but necessary process of reclaiming autonomy. For so long, her decisions, her emotions, and her sense of self have been controlled by another. The narcissistic partner's constant need for validation, manipulation, and emotional dominance has forced her to live in a state of perpetual self-sacrifice. Every decision she made was filtered through their lens, and every dream or desire was dismissed as unimportant. To break free from this control requires not just external action, but internal transformation. It is a mental shift, an awakening to the truth that she does not need the approval or validation of the narcissist to be whole. In this shift, she reclaims her power to make choices based on her own needs, desires, and values. Self-worth, once lost in the fog of manipulation and neglect, must now be rebuilt. The woman who has spent years questioning her worth, drowning in the emotional fog created by the narcissist, must rediscover the essence of who she truly is. It is not an easy process. The journey to reclaiming self-worth often begins with peeling back layers of shame, guilt, and self-doubt that were placed there by the narcissist. It means acknowledging the reality of the abuse and understanding that her value was never dependent on the narcissist's capacity to love or respect her. As she begins to rebuild her self-worth, she realizes that her value was inherent all along. It was never lost, but only hidden under the weight of someone else's demands. Reclaiming autonomy and self-worth is not a linear journey, nor is it one without challenges. There will be moments of doubt, times when the past whispers that she is not enough or tries to pull her back into the familiar dynamics of control and manipulation. But with every step forward, she learns to trust herself more deeply, to value her voice, and to honor her needs. Breaking free is not a one-time event, but a continuous process of choosing herself over and over again. It is about creating boundaries that protect her emotional space, surrounding herself with those who uplift and support her, and carving out a life that is no longer defined by someone else's narrative. As she steps into her autonomy, she realizes the incredible strength it took to get there, and that the woman she is becoming is more powerful, more whole, and more worthy than she ever knew herself to be. There is an extraordinary power in vulnerability, one that is often misunderstood or feared. In a world that glorifies perfection, strength, and control, the idea of allowing oneself to be seen in all of one's imperfection seems like an act of weakness. Yet true empowerment lies not in the facade of perfection, but in the courage to show up as we are, with all our flaws, wounds, and uncertainties. Vulnerability is not a liability. It is the gateway to deeper connection, personal growth, and resilience. For many women who have spent years hiding their true selves behind a mask of perfectionism, the journey toward embracing vulnerability can be both liberating and transformative. To embrace vulnerability is to acknowledge that we are human. It is the recognition that imperfection is not a flaw to be hidden, but a strength to be celebrated. When we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, we open the door to self-acceptance. It is in these moments of raw honesty with ourselves that we can finally stop pretending to be something we are not and begin to embrace who we truly are. For so many women in narcissistic relationships, vulnerability has often been seen as a threat, something to be guarded against. The narcissist's need for control and perfection made vulnerability a dangerous concept, one that was met with manipulation or rejection. But the act of reclaiming vulnerability is the first step toward reclaiming one's true power. This process of embracing vulnerability involves letting go of the need for external validation. We often seek validation from others, hoping that their approval will fill the void we feel inside. But when we choose vulnerability, we stop looking outside ourselves for permission to be imperfect. We no longer seek the approval of those who would never truly accept us for who we are. Instead, we give ourselves the grace to fall short, to make mistakes, and to learn from those experiences. It is through this self-acceptance that we discover the strength to be authentic, to stand tall in our imperfections, and to know that we are worthy of love and respect exactly as we are. Vulnerability is not about exposing weakness. It is about revealing the truth of who we are and owning it with pride. In embracing our imperfections, we find not only empowerment, but also a profound sense of freedom. The chains of perfectionism, self-doubt, and fear of judgment begin to break away. No longer are we bound by the expectation to be flawless. Instead, we can show up in the world as our true selves, knowing that our worth is not dependent on meeting anyone else's standards. The beauty of vulnerability is that it allows us to connect with others in a way that is authentic and real. When we embrace our imperfections, we invite others to do the same, creating spaces of mutual understanding, compassion, and growth. It is through this vulnerability that we can experience true intimacy, not just with others, but with ourselves. And in this truth, we find the most powerful kind of empowerment, one that is grounded in acceptance, love, and the freedom to be fully human.